Everyone feared the rancher, but the orphan girl being sold just hugged him and called him Grandpa. The auction yard was dusty and loud that afternoon. Trucks were parked in long rows. Men in worn hats stood in small groups, talking about cattle prices and weather. A few women watched from the shade of an old wooden building. It was the kind of place where people came to buy and sell animals, tools, and sometimes even old farm equipment. No one expected to see a child standing near the front that day. She was small, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Her dress was faded and her shoes did not fit her well. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid that had started to fall apart. She held a small cloth bag in both hands. Inside it were the only things she owned. Her eyes were wide, but she was not crying. She just stood there, quiet and still, like she had already learned not to expect too much from the world. Beside her stood a man and a woman who said they were her distant relatives. They spoke in low voices to the auction organizer. They said they could not care for her anymore. Times were hard, money was short, they needed help. People nearby pretended not to listen, but everyone heard enough to understand. Across the yard, a tall rancher stepped out of his truck. The sound of the door shutting made a few people glance his way. He was known in the area. His name was spoken carefully, often in a whisper. He owned one of the largest ranches in the region. His land stretched far beyond the hills. He rarely smiled. He rarely spoke unless necessary. Many believed he had no heart left. Some said he used to be different. Long ago, he had a wife and a young daughter. A sickness came one winter and both were gone within weeks. After that, he changed. He stopped coming to town except for business. He did not attend gatherings. He did not celebrate holidays. He worked from sunrise to sunset and kept to himself. People respected him, but they also feared him. When he walked through the auction yard, conversations grew quieter. He nodded once to the auctioneer but said nothing more. He came to buy 2 young horses, that was all. The orphan girl noticed him almost at once. She did not know his story. She did not know the rumors. She only saw an old man standing alone, his hands rough, his shoulders heavy. There was something about him that felt familiar. Maybe it was the way he stood, steady and strong. Maybe it was the sadness in his eyes. The auction began. Animals were led forward. Bids were called out. The rancher raised his hand twice and secured the horses he wanted. It should have ended there. But then the organizer cleared his throat and spoke in an uneasy voice. He mentioned the child. He did not call it a sale. He called it an arrangement. If someone was willing to take responsibility for her, her relatives would sign papers and leave. The words hung in the air like dust. People shifted uncomfortably. A few shook their heads. Some looked away. No one stepped forward. The little girl felt the weight of all those eyes. She held her bag tighter. Her relatives avoided looking at her. The woman whispered something about needing to catch their ride. The man said nothing. The rancher stood still. He told himself it was not his concern. He had enough work, enough land, enough silence. He did not need more trouble. He turned slightly, ready to leave. That was when the girl moved. Without warning, she ran across the yard. Her shoes slipped in the dirt, but she did not fall. Before anyone understood what she was doing, she reached the rancher and wrapped her thin arms around his waist. Her bag dropped to the ground. "Grandpa," she said softly. The word was clear, simple, full of trust. The rancher froze. His hands stayed at his sides. He could feel her small body trembling. The entire yard went silent. Even the animals seemed quieter. He looked down at her. She looked up at him with eyes that were not begging, not demanding, just hoping. "I don't have a grandpa," she said in a small voice. "But you look like one." A few people gasped quietly. Someone muttered that the child did not understand who she was holding, but she did not move. The rancher swallowed hard. It had been years since anyone had touched him like that. Years since anyone had used a family word near him. Something inside his chest tightened in a way he had not felt in a long time. "You should let go," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Please don't leave." Her relatives looked embarrassed. The man stepped forward, ready to pull her away, but the rancher raised one hand slightly. Not in anger, but in warning. The man stopped. The rancher bent down slowly. His knees were stiff from years of work. He picked up her bag from the dirt and held it out to her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," she replied. He nodded once. "Do you know what you're doing?" She thought for a moment. "I think so." The rancher looked around. The crowd was watching closely now. Some were curious, some were judging. He felt the weight of their eyes, but for once it did not matter. He looked back at the girl. She had not let go. He could walk away. He had done it before. He could return to his ranch and continue his quiet life. No one would question it. But the word grandpa echoed in his mind. He remembered his daughter running through tall grass. He remembered small hands holding his fingers. He remembered laughter that once filled his house. He cleared his throat. "If I take her," he said slowly to the organizer, "it won't be for a season, it will be for good." The organizer nodded quickly. The relatives agreed at once. Papers were brought forward. The rancher signed his name with a steady hand. He did not look at the crowd while he did it. When it was done, he turned to the girl again. "Emily," he said, testing the name, "you'll have chores." She smiled for the first time. "I can work." "You'll have rules," she nodded. "I can follow them." He paused. "And I'm not your grandpa." She tilted her head. "Not yet." For the first time in many years, something close to a smile touched his face. It was small and quick, but it was there. He guided her toward his truck. The crowd slowly began to talk again, but their voices had changed. The fear that once followed him felt weaker. Confusion replaced it, maybe even a bit of respect. As they reached the truck, Emily looked up at him again. "Do you have animals?" "Yes." "Do they have names?" "Some do. Can I help feed them?" He opened the passenger door and helped her climb inside. "We'll see." She held her bag on her lap and looked out the window as he started the engine. The rancher glanced at her once more before driving away. The road back to the ranch was long and quiet. The wind moved through open fields. Emily did not speak for a while. She simply watched the land pass by. The rancher felt something strange beside him. It was not noise, it was not trouble, it was presence. The seat that had been empty for years was not empty anymore. After some time, she spoke softly. "Thank you." He kept his eyes on the road. "For what?" "For not leaving." He did not answer right away. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The ranch came into view as the sun began to lower. The house stood alone but strong. The barn doors were open. A few horses moved slowly in the pasture. Emily leaned forward, eyes wide. "It's big." "Yes," he said. As the truck rolled to a stop, he turned off the engine. The silence returned, but it felt different now, not heavy, just quiet. He stepped out and walked around to help her down. She looked small standing beside him, but she did not seem afraid. "This is your home now," he said carefully. She looked up at him again. "Our home." He hesitated, then nodded once. As they walked toward the house together, the rancher realized something important. The town may have feared him. They may have misunderstood him. But this little girl had seen something else. Something he thought was gone. Morning came early on the ranch. The sky was still soft and pale when the rancher stepped outside. He moved quietly, as he always did, checking the fences and feeding the animals before the sun rose fully. For years, this routine had been the same. Silence had been his only companion. But today, something felt different. He paused for a moment near the barn, listening. He thought he heard movement inside the house. Emily woke slowly in a room that smelled of wood and clean air. The bed felt large compared to what she was used to. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then she remembered the long drive and the man she called Grandpa. She sat up and looked around. The room was simple but warm. A small window let in soft light. Someone had placed a folded blanket at the end of the bed during the night. She slipped off the bed and walked toward the door. The house was quiet. She followed the smell of coffee and toast into the kitchen. The rancher stood near the stove, pouring coffee into a mug. He turned slightly when he heard her steps. "You're awake early," he said. She nodded. "I didn't want to miss anything." He gave a small nod and set a plate on the table. "Sit, eat." She sat carefully and looked around the kitchen. There were old pictures on the wall. One showed a younger man standing beside a smiling woman and a little girl. Emily stared at it for a long time. "Is that you?" she asked softly. The rancher glanced at the picture but said nothing for a moment. "Yes." "They look happy," she said. He placed another slice of bread on her plate. "Eat before it gets cold." She understood he did not want to talk more about it, so she stayed quiet. They ate in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. It felt calm. After breakfast, he handed her a small pair of gloves. "If you're going to stay here, you help." Her eyes lit up. "What do I do first?" "Feeding the chickens," he said. Outside, the morning air felt cool. Emily followed him closely, watching how he moved and how he checked everything carefully. The animals seemed used to him. Even the horses looked toward him with calm eyes. When he showed her how to scatter feed for the chickens, she listened closely. "Like this?" she asked, copying his movements. "Yes," he said simply. She laughed when the chickens rushed toward her feet. The sound of her laughter surprised him. It echoed across the yard, filling spaces that had been silent for years. Later that day, they repaired a loose fence together. He handed her small tools and explained each step. She asked many questions, and he answered them one by one. Slowly, he noticed something changing inside him. He spoke more than usual. He found himself explaining things he had not explained to anyone in a long time. By afternoon, a truck pulled up near the gate. The rancher's face grew serious when he saw it. A neighbor stepped out, a man named Carl who owned land nearby. Carl looked curious as he approached. "Heard you came back from town with a surprise," Carl said with a half-smile. The rancher nodded once. "This is Emily." Emily waved politely. "Hello." Carl looked surprised but friendly. "Well, hello there." They spoke for a while about work and weather, but Carl's eyes kept returning to Emily. After he left, Emily looked up at the rancher. "Was he nice?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Do people visit often?" He shook his head. "Not much," she thought about that. "Maybe they will now." He did not respond, but he felt a strange warmth at her words. Days passed, and a routine began to form. Emily helped with chores every morning. She learned to brush the horses gently and carry small buckets without spilling. She followed him everywhere, sometimes talking endlessly, sometimes walking quietly beside him. One evening, while sitting on the porch, she asked, "Why do people look scared when they see you?" The question caught him off guard. He stared at the horizon for a long time before answering. "People believe stories. Are they true?" she asked carefully. "Some are," he said. "Some are not." She nodded slowly, accepting his answer without pushing further. At night, he found himself checking her room before going to bed. He made sure the window was closed and the blankets were warm. He told himself it was only responsibility, nothing more. But each time he saw her sleeping peacefully, something softened inside him. Meanwhile, news spread through town quickly. Some people approved of what he had done. Others questioned it. A few wondered why a man known for being distant would suddenly take care of a child. Rumors traveled faster than truth, but he ignored them. One afternoon, while fixing a broken gate, Emily sat nearby drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. "Do you miss your old home?" he asked suddenly. She thought carefully before answering. "I miss some things, but I like it here." "Why?" she smiled. "Because you listen even when you don't talk." Her words stayed with him long after she went inside. As weeks passed, small changes appeared in the house. A colorful drawing hung on the fridge. A small pair of boots rested near the door. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallways. The ranch no longer felt frozen in time. One evening, a storm rolled across the land. Thunder shook the windows. Emily came quietly into the living room where he sat reading. "Can I sit here?" she asked. He nodded. She curled up on the couch, watching the rain fall outside. "Storms used to scare me," she said softly. "And now?" he asked. She looked at him and smiled. "Not when I'm here." He felt something heavy lift from his chest. For years, storms had only reminded him of loss. Now they felt different. The next morning, he realized he was waiting to hear her voice when he woke. The silence he once protected felt strange without her presence. One day, while walking through town to buy supplies, Emily held his hand without asking. People watched them closely. Some smiled, others looked surprised. The rancher felt their eyes but did not pull away. At the store, Emily picked up a small toy horse and looked at him hopefully. He hesitated, then nodded. Her happiness filled the small space between them. On the drive back home, she said quietly, "I think you are like a grandpa." He kept his eyes on the road. "You still think that?" "Yes," she said, "because you take care of me." He did not answer, but his grip on the steering wheel relaxed. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was setting behind the hills. Emily ran ahead toward the house, her laughter carried by the wind. The rancher watched her for a moment before following. He realized something he had been trying not to admit. The girl had changed more than his routine. She had changed how he saw the world. The walls he built around himself were beginning to crack, slowly and quietly. He had feared caring again. He had feared losing again. But each day with Emily made him forget that fear just a little more. As night fell, they sat together at the kitchen table, sharing a simple meal. She talked about the animals and her drawings. He listened. And for the first time in many years, the ranch felt not just alive, but filled with something stronger than memory. A new beginning he had never expected. The quiet rhythm of life on the ranch continued, but small changes began to appear around them. Word had spread far beyond the nearby town. Some people admired what the rancher had done, while others questioned it. He ignored most of it, focusing instead on daily work and on Emily's growing laughter that filled the house. One morning, a car he did not recognize stopped near the front gate. The rancher noticed it while repairing a fence. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward it slowly. A woman stepped out, holding a folder. She wore simple clothes and had a calm expression, but her serious eyes told him this was not a casual visit. "Good morning," she said politely. "I'm Ms. Carter. I work with Child Services. I'm here to check on Emily." The rancher nodded once. He had expected something like this. "She's inside," he said. Emily peeked through the window, watching carefully. When she saw the rancher walking back toward the house with the visitor, she stepped outside. She stood close to him, holding the edge of his shirt lightly. "Hello, Emily," Ms. Carter said with a gentle smile. "I just want to talk with you and see how you're doing." Emily nodded but stayed close to the rancher. They sat at the kitchen table. Ms. Carter asked simple questions about meals, chores, schoolwork, and how Emily felt living there. Emily answered honestly. "I like it," she said. "We work together, the animals are nice." "And the rancher?" Ms. Carter asked kindly. Emily looked up at him before answering. "He's quiet, but he takes care of me." The rancher felt a strange warmth hearing those words. Ms. Carter wrote notes and observed quietly. She walked through the house, checking rooms and making sure everything was safe. "You've done a good job here," she said finally. "But there will be a process. We need to make sure everything is legal and stable for her future." He nodded. "I understand." After she left, Emily looked worried. "Am I going somewhere else?" "No," he said firmly. "Not unless you want to." She shook her head quickly. "I want to stay." He gave a small nod. "Then we'll figure it out." But that evening, he sat alone on the porch long after Emily went to bed. The thought of losing her weighed heavily on him. He had begun to believe this new life would continue quietly, but now he understood that nothing was certain. Over the next few weeks, more visits followed. Ms. Carter spoke to neighbors, teachers, and even people in town who knew the rancher. Some spoke kindly of him. Others shared old stories that made him seem distant or difficult. He tried not to let it bother him, but he felt judged. Emily noticed his silence growing heavier. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked one night. He looked surprised. "No." "Then why do you look sad?" He paused before answering. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to solve." She thought carefully, then placed her small hand on his arm. "We can solve them together." Her simple words stayed with him. One afternoon, Emily followed him into the barn while he worked on a broken saddle. She sat nearby, watching closely. "You work a lot," she said. "That's how things get done." She nodded. "But you smile more now." He stopped working for a moment, surprised by her observation. "Do I?" "Yes," she said confidently. He turned back to the saddle, but inside he felt something shift. Maybe she was right. A few days later, a group of people from town stopped by unexpectedly. Some brought food. Others just wanted to meet Emily. It felt strange to him, having so many visitors, but Emily greeted them with excitement, showing them the chickens and her favorite horse. One older woman pulled him aside. "You've changed," she said kindly. He shrugged. "Maybe." "It's good to see," she added. That evening, Emily fell asleep early after the busy day. The rancher sat in the living room, thinking about how different life had become. The house that once felt too quiet now felt full of small sounds, footsteps, laughter, even questions that never seemed to end. But challenges continued. One morning, Emily woke with a fever. She looked pale and tired, which worried him immediately. He drove her to the nearest clinic, staying beside her the entire time. Seeing her weak made him realize how deeply he cared. "She'll be fine," the doctor assured him. "Just rest and medicine." He nodded, relief washing over him. On the drive home, Emily rested her head against the seat. "You stayed the whole time," she said softly. "Of course," he replied. She smiled faintly. "That's what grandpas do." He did not correct her this time. Back at the ranch, he prepared soup and sat beside her until she fell asleep. Watching her breathe calmly, he felt a strong need to protect her from anything that might harm her. The fear of losing someone again rose inside him, but this time he did not push it away. He accepted it as part of caring. As Emily recovered, Ms. Carter returned with new papers and questions. She explained that the process might take time. There would be interviews, background checks, and legal steps. The rancher listened carefully. "Do you want to do this?" she asked him directly. He hesitated only for a second. "Yes." Emily stood nearby, listening. Her face brightened when she heard his answer. One afternoon, while they worked together in the garden, Emily suddenly hugged him from behind. "What was that for?" he asked. "No reason," she said. "Just because," he laughed quietly, a rare sound that surprised even him. The town slowly began to see him differently. People waved when he passed by. Some invited him to small gatherings. He did not attend all of them, but he stopped avoiding everyone completely. Still, the process with child services continued. Each visit reminded him that nothing was final yet. Each time someone asked questions about his past, he felt old wounds reopen. But Emily's trust gave him strength to continue. One evening they sat together watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and gold over the fields. "Do you think they will let me stay?" Emily asked softly. He looked at her seriously. "I will do everything I can." She leaned against his shoulder. "I believe you." Her faith in him felt heavier than any responsibility he had carried before, but it also gave him purpose. As darkness fell, he realized something important. The girl who once hugged a stranger in a dusty auction yard had changed not only his daily life but his heart. He was no longer just a man trying to forget the past. He was someone learning to care again, step by step. The weeks that followed felt longer than usual. The rancher tried to keep life steady for Emily, but he knew an important decision was coming. Papers were being reviewed. People were talking. The future was being discussed in offices far away from the quiet ranch. Emily sensed the tension even when he tried to hide it. She noticed how he sat longer at the kitchen table after dinner, staring at nothing. She saw how he folded and unfolded the same paper more than once. She did not fully understand legal matters, but she understood worry. One morning, Ms. Carter arrived again, this time with a serious expression. She asked to speak with the rancher alone. Emily waited outside near the porch steps, pretending to draw in the dirt with a stick while listening for any change in tone. Inside, Ms. Carter spoke calmly. "There have been questions raised about your past. Some people believe you are too distant to raise a child. Others say you live too far from town." The rancher nodded slowly. He expected that. "I can change what needs to be changed," he said. "I can drive her to school. I can attend meetings. It's not only about logistics," she replied gently. "It's about stability. People want to be sure she will grow up in a warm and supportive place." He felt the words carefully. Warm and supportive. He had not been described that way in many years. "She is safe here," he said firmly. "She is cared for." "I can see that," Ms. Carter said, "but the final hearing is coming soon. You will need to speak clearly about why you want this responsibility." After she left, the rancher stepped outside. Emily looked up quickly. "Are we okay?" she asked. He knelt down in front of her. "We are still working on it." She studied his face. "You look tired." He gave a small smile, just thinking. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A truck stopped near the ranch gate. A well-dressed man stepped out. He introduced himself as a distant relative of Emily's late parents. He claimed he had recently learned about her situation and wanted to consider taking her in. The rancher felt a sharp wave of concern. He invited the man inside but remained cautious. The visitor looked around the house slowly. "It's simple," he said. "It's honest," the rancher replied. Emily stood close to him again, her small hand gripping his sleeve. The visitor smiled politely at her but seemed more interested in paperwork than in her feelings. "We have to consider what is best for her future," the visitor said. "Education, social life opportunities." The rancher stayed calm. "She has school. She has space to grow. She has care." The man looked unconvinced. He left with a promise to speak with the authorities. That night, Emily asked, "Was he going to take me?" The rancher hesitated before answering. "He might try," her eyes filled with worry. "But I don't know him." He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And I know you." She nodded slowly, trusting him. The next few days felt heavy. The rancher contacted a lawyer from town to prepare for the hearing. He gathered documents, references, and letters from neighbors who had seen his care for Emily. To his surprise, many people were willing to support him. Carl, the neighbor who had first visited after Emily arrived, offered to speak on his behalf. The older woman from town wrote a kind letter describing the change she had seen in him. Even the school teacher sent a note praising Emily's happiness and progress. Each small act of support gave him quiet strength. Meanwhile, Emily continued her daily routine. She fed the chickens, brushed the horses, and worked beside him in the fields, but sometimes he caught her watching him with concern. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she spoke softly. "If I have to leave, will you be okay?" The question struck him deeply. He turned toward her, his voice steady but gentle. "You are not leaving without a fight." She smiled at his words but still looked unsure. The day of the hearing finally arrived. The courthouse in town felt formal and unfamiliar. Emily wore her cleanest dress. The rancher wore a pressed shirt he had not taken out in years. Inside the small courtroom, officials listened carefully. The distant relative spoke about better opportunities in the city. He described schools, parks, and modern life. He spoke kindly, but his words felt distant like a sales pitch. Then it was the rancher's turn. He stood slowly, not used to speaking in public. His hands were rough from years of work, but his voice was steady. "I did not plan to become her guardian," he began. "She ran to me. She chose me before I chose her." The room grew quiet. "I have land, I have work, I have a home, but more than that, I have learned how much she means to me. She brought light back into a place that had been dark for years." He paused, searching for the right words. "I may not speak much," he continued, "but I show up every day. I cook, I clean, I teach, I protect. She is not a project to me, she is family." Emily watched him closely, her eyes wide. "I lost my family once," he added softly. "I know what it means to care. And I will not walk away from that again." The judge listened carefully. Others in the room nodded quietly. Finally, the judge asked Emily if she wished to speak. She stood on the small platform, her hands folded together. "I like it on the ranch," she said clearly. "He makes pancakes on Sundays. He checks on me at night. He listens when I talk. I feel safe there." Her simple words carried more weight than any long speech. After hours of discussion, the judge announced that the decision would come soon, but the signs were hopeful. The rancher felt cautious relief. When they stepped outside the courthouse, Emily reached for his hand. "You talked a lot," she said with a small smile. He almost laughed. "More than usual." On the drive home, the sky seemed brighter. The ranch appeared ahead like a place waiting for them. Days later, the official decision arrived. Full guardianship was granted. The judge had concluded that stability, care, and emotional connection mattered more than distance or reputation. When the rancher read the letter aloud, Emily jumped into his arms without hesitation. "We did it," she whispered. He held her carefully, feeling something settle inside him that had been restless for years. That evening, neighbors stopped by with small gifts and warm words. The ranch felt alive with quiet celebration. The once feared rancher stood among them, no longer distant, no longer alone. As night fell, he sat on the porch with Emily beside him. The fields stretched peacefully before them. "Are you still going to call me Grandpa?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him with a bright smile. "Of course." He nodded slowly, finally accepting the name fully. The journey had not been easy. Old fears had surfaced. Questions had been asked. Doubts had been raised. But through it all, one simple truth remained. A child's trust had broken down walls that years of loneliness had built. The ranch felt different that morning. The sun rose slowly, casting a warm light over the fields, the barn, and the house. Birds called softly from the trees, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The rancher stood on the porch, sipping coffee, listening to the familiar sounds that now seemed full of life. It had been a long journey, full of worry and uncertainty, but today felt like a new beginning. Emily came running out of the house in her small boots, her braid bouncing behind her. She carried a small basket of eggs from the chicken coop. "Good morning," she called cheerfully. "Good morning," the rancher replied, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. She skipped toward him and handed him the basket. "Look, all of them are perfect today." He took the basket carefully, nodding in approval. "Yes, they are. Good work." Emily grinned. "I like taking care of them. It makes me feel useful." He paused for a moment, studying her. For years, he had avoided attachments, believing that caring too deeply only brought pain. Yet this little girl, full of courage and trust, had changed him. She had brought laughter back into his life and reminded him of the warmth he thought he had lost forever. As they carried the eggs into the house together, a truck approached the ranch gate. It was Ms. Carter, smiling as she waved. The rancher led her inside while Emily stayed close to him, holding his hand. "I heard the news," Ms. Carter said as they sat at the kitchen table. "Congratulations, the guardianship is official now. You're her permanent guardian." Emily jumped up and hugged him tightly. "You're really my grandpa now?" she exclaimed. He felt something he had not experienced in a long time, pure, unguarded happiness. He hugged her back, careful not to squeeze too hard. "Yes," he said quietly, "I'm your grandpa now." Later that morning, the rancher decided to show Emily around the entire property. He pointed out the horses, explaining which ones needed special care. He led her to the vegetable garden, teaching her how to check the plants and pull weeds gently so they did not get damaged. Emily listened carefully, repeating the instructions to make sure she remembered everything. "You're learning fast," he said. "Soon you'll be able to do most of the work on your own." She smiled proudly. "I want to help. I want to do it right." As they worked together, the rancher reflected on how much she had grown. In the past months, she had become confident and joyful. She no longer clung to him with uncertainty. She ran freely, laughed loudly, and spoke her mind. And yet, she still came to him when she needed guidance, showing that the bond they shared had grown stronger than any words could describe. The afternoon brought visitors from the town. Neighbors came by to congratulate them and offer small gifts, fresh-baked bread, flowers, and homemade preserves. For the first time, the rancher felt a sense of community he had long avoided. People smiled at him without fear, and children waved at Emily, making her giggle with delight. One neighbor, an older man named Henry, clapped the rancher on the back. "I've never seen you like this before. You're a good man, taking care of her the way you do." The rancher nodded, appreciating the words. "Thank you," he said simply. As evening approached, Emily ran ahead to feed the animals one last time before sunset. She paused by the barn, laughing as a small foal ran around her. The rancher watched from a distance, noticing how natural and free she looked in this environment. He felt a deep sense of pride, realizing that he had created a home where she could thrive and feel safe. After the chores, they returned to the house. Emily helped him set the table for dinner. The two of them worked quietly, the rhythm of the kitchen comfortable and familiar. During the meal, Emily looked up at him and asked, "Grandpa, will we always stay here?" He set down his fork and looked at her carefully. "As long as you want to," he said. "This is your home and it will always be yours." Her eyes brightened. "I want to stay forever." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Then we will stay forever." After dinner, they went out onto the porch. The stars were beginning to appear, sparkling over the fields and hills. Emily leaned against him, pointing out constellations she had learned from a book at school. "Do you see that one?" she asked. "That's Orion." He looked up, remembering the nights of his past, alone under the same sky. But tonight, he was not alone. He had a granddaughter who trusted him, loved him, and brought meaning back into his life. "I see it," he said quietly. "And I'll remember it because we're looking at it together." Emily smiled and snuggled closer. "I like being with you, Grandpa." He held her carefully, feeling the weight of responsibility and the joy it brought. For so many years, he had believed that love brought only pain. But now, with Emily beside him, he realized that love could also bring healing, purpose, and happiness. Over the next days, life on the ranch settled into a peaceful rhythm. Emily attended school and returned home to help with chores. The rancher taught her everything he knew about the land, the animals, and living independently. She learned quickly, impressing him with her determination and intelligence. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the town, sent by one of the neighbors who had witnessed the hearing. It expressed support and pride in the rancher for his dedication to Emily. He read it quietly, feeling a sense of validation that he had not experienced in years. It reminded him that the world outside the ranch could recognize good deeds, even when he had long believed otherwise. That evening, Emily asked if they could have a picnic near the creek. The rancher agreed, and they packed a small basket with bread, cheese, and fresh fruit. They walked together to the water, where Emily skipped stones and laughed as the ripples spread. "You're really good at this," the rancher said, smiling. "Not as good as you," she replied. They sat on a fallen log, eating their picnic in comfortable silence. The sun reflected on the water and birds flew overhead. It was simple, peaceful, and perfect. On the walk back, Emily held his hand tightly. "Grandpa," she said softly, "thank you for letting me stay here. I love it." He looked down at her, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not felt in years. "I love having you here too," he said. Weeks turned into months. The ranch thrived, Emily grew stronger and happier, and the rancher discovered a joy he had thought was lost forever. Their bond continued to deepen, built on trust, care, and shared experiences. One night, as they sat on the porch together, the rancher thought about how far they had come. He remembered the day she had run to him at the auction yard, calling him Grandpa for the first time. That moment had changed everything. He had feared responsibility, feared attachment, and feared loss, yet here they were, stronger together than ever. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, pointing at the stars. "Do you think they shine just for us?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "Maybe, or maybe they shine for everyone who believes in love and family." She smiled, closing her eyes, feeling safe and loved. The rancher wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. For the first time in years, he felt a complete sense of peace. The ranch was no longer just land and buildings. It was laughter, warmth, and love. It was a home where an orphaned girl had found a family, and a man who had once feared connection had found purpose again. Together they faced the future not alone, but as a family, strong, safe, and full of hope.